was a crisp autumn morning on the campus of Columbia University. The golden leaves pirouetted through the air, carried by a gentle breeze, as students hurried to their classes. Among them was Evelyn Carter, her arms full of medical textbooks, her mind preoccupied with an upcoming presentation on neuroplasticity. She was walking briskly, her ballet flats clicking against the cobblestones, when fate intervened. Turning a corner near the humanities building, Evelyn collided with Nathaniel Blake, a tall, striking man in a tailored charcoal suit. His designer backpack slung casually over one shoulder hinted at his confidence, while the faint lines of exhaustion under his eyes betrayed a night spent working late. The impact sent Evelyn's books flying, pages fluttering like startled birds in the autumn air. For a brief moment, Evelyn felt her heart skip a beat, not from the collision, but from the magnetic presence of the man before her. It was as if the world had paused, leaving only the two of them amidst the swirling golden leaves. "I'm so sorry," they said in unison, their voices overlapping as they both knelt to gather the scattered books. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same volume, and Evelyn looked up, meeting Nathaniel's gaze for the first time. His deep brown eyes, flecked with gold, held a warmth that contrasted with his sharp, businesslike demeanor. For a moment, the bustling campus seemed to fade away. Nathaniel handed her a book, his lips curving into a small smile. "I should have been paying attention," he said, his voice smooth yet sincere. "Are you okay?" Evelyn nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I was the one distracted. These books have been trying to escape all morning." They exchanged a laugh, and as they stood, Nathaniel extended his hand. "Nathaniel Blake," he introduced himself. "Evelyn Carter," she replied, shaking his hand. As they parted ways, neither could shake the feeling that something extraordinary had just begun. Evelyn and Nathaniel's connection grew quickly after their first meeting. What started as casual coffee chats at the campus cafe soon turned into long, heartfelt conversations about their dreams, fears, and ambitions. Evelyn shared her passion for neurosurgery, her desire to make groundbreaking discoveries in the field, and her commitment to helping patients regain their lives. Nathaniel, in turn, opened up about the weight of inheriting his family's business, Blake Enterprises, and his determination to modernize it while honoring his late father's legacy. Their relationship blossomed in the most natural way. Nathaniel admired Evelyn's intelligence and compassion, while Evelyn found comfort in Nathaniel's unwavering support and quiet strength. Despite their busy schedules, they always made time for each other, whether it was a late-night phone call or a spontaneous weekend getaway. Their love was a sanctuary amidst the chaos of their demanding lives. 2 years later, Nathaniel proposed in the most romantic way imaginable. On a snowy evening in December, he took Evelyn to the rooftop of a luxury hotel overlooking the city. The skyline sparkled with lights, and soft snowflakes fell around them. As Evelyn turned to admire the view, Nathaniel knelt down on one knee, holding a small velvet box. "Evelyn Carter," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You are the most extraordinary person I've ever met. You've shown me what it means to love selflessly, to dream fearlessly, and to live fully. Will you marry me?" Evelyn turned to face him, the city skyline sparkling behind him and soft snowflakes landing gently on his shoulders. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "Yes, Nathaniel, 1,000 times yes." In that moment, the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the overwhelming love she felt for him. Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes as she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Nathaniel, 1,000 times yes." Their wedding was nothing short of a fairy tale. Held at a grand cathedral in New York City, it was attended by hundreds of guests, including family, friends, and prominent figures from both the medical and business worlds. Evelyn walked down the aisle in a stunning lace gown, her face glowing with happiness. Nathaniel, waiting at the altar, couldn't take his eyes off her. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through all of life's challenges, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Their first kiss as husband and wife was met with thunderous applause, and the reception that followed was a celebration of love, laughter, and hope for the future. For Evelyn and Nathaniel, it felt like the beginning of a perfect life together. But life, as they would soon learn, had its own plans. Evelyn and Nathaniel's marriage, which had started as a fairy tale, soon began to show signs of strain. Life, with all its demands and responsibilities, started to pull them in different directions. Nathaniel, now the CEO of Blake Enterprises after his father's sudden passing, found himself consumed by the pressures of running a multi-billion-dollar company. Late nights at the office turned into early mornings, and his phone was constantly buzzing with calls and emails. Evelyn, on the other hand, was in the middle of her grueling residency as a neurosurgeon. Her days were spent in operating rooms, her nights studying cases, and her weekends on call. Despite her own exhaustion, she longed for Nathaniel's presence, for the quiet moments they used to share. But those moments became increasingly rare. The distance between them wasn't caused by arguments or dramatic fights. It was the small, everyday moments that were missed. Dinners eaten alone, birthdays celebrated apart, and conversations that never happened because one of them was too tired or too busy. Evelyn tried to reach out, but Nathaniel, overwhelmed by his responsibilities, often didn't notice her growing loneliness. The breaking point came when Evelyn discovered she was pregnant. She was overjoyed, imagining how this new chapter could bring them closer together, but every time she tried to tell Nathaniel, he was either rushing out the door or glued to his laptop. Weeks passed, and Evelyn began to feel like her joy was hers alone to bear. Then, one devastating night, she suffered a miscarriage. She sat in the hospital alone, clutching the ultrasound photo of the baby she would never meet. When Nathaniel arrived hours later, his face was pale, his eyes wide with guilt and panic. He reached for her hand, but Evelyn pulled away, her tears falling silently. "You weren't there," she whispered, her voice breaking. The words hung in the air like a final blow, cutting through the fragile thread that had held them together. Nathaniel's hand fell to his side, and for the first time, he realized just how far apart they had drifted. Nathaniel's heart shattered at her words, but he knew she was right. In that moment, the distance between them felt insurmountable. Nathaniel arrived hours later. Guilt etched across his face, but by then, the damage had been done. Evelyn's grief, compounded by the feeling of abandonment, created a chasm between them that neither knew how to bridge. Eventually, they both realized that love alone wasn't enough to sustain their marriage. They needed time, presence, and effort, things they could no longer give each other. With heavy hearts, they decided to part ways. The divorce was amicable, but deeply painful. As Evelyn packed her belongings and left the apartment they once called home, she couldn't help but wonder if they had failed each other, or if life had simply been too much for them to handle. After the divorce, Evelyn and Nathaniel went their separate ways, each trying to rebuild their lives. For Evelyn, the pain of losing both her child and her marriage became a driving force. She threw herself into her work, determined to make a difference in the lives of her patients. Over the next year, she rose to prominence in the medical field, earning recognition for her groundbreaking research in neurosurgery. Her colleagues admired her dedication, but behind her professional success, Evelyn carried a quiet sadness. No matter how many lives she saved, she couldn't fill the void left by Nathaniel. Nathaniel, meanwhile, focused on expanding Blake Enterprises. Under his leadership, the company flourished, breaking into new markets and achieving record profits. To the outside world, he was the picture of success, a young, charismatic CEO with the world at his feet. But inside, Nathaniel felt empty. The long hours and endless meetings couldn't distract him from the ache of Evelyn's absence. He often found himself looking at old photos of them together, wondering if he had made the right choices. Though they lived separate lives, neither could truly move on. Evelyn tried dating again, but found it impossible to connect with anyone the way she had with Nathaniel. Nathaniel, too, avoided relationships, unable to imagine loving someone else. Their paths never crossed, but they remained in each other's thoughts. Evelyn would sometimes hear about Nathaniel's achievements in the business world, while Nathaniel would occasionally see Evelyn's name in medical journals. Both felt a pang of longing, a sense that something was missing. A year passed this way. Two people living parallel lives, successful in their own right, but incomplete without each other. Little did they know, fate had plans to bring them back together. It was a warm spring evening when fate brought Evelyn and Nathaniel back together. The occasion was a charity gala hosted by Blake Enterprises, an event that Evelyn had been invited to by a colleague. She hesitated at first, unsure if she wanted to attend something so closely tied to Nathaniel's world. But in the end, she decided to go, thinking it was just another event, another evening to network and support a good cause. The grand ballroom was filled with the city's elite, business leaders, philanthropists, and medical professionals. Evelyn, dressed in an elegant emerald gown, moved through the crowd with grace, exchanging polite smiles and engaging in small talk. She was in the middle of a conversation when she felt it, a familiar presence. Turning around, her breath caught in her throat. There he was, standing across the room, looking as striking as ever in a tailored black tuxedo. Nathaniel had spotted her the moment she walked in. For a moment, he thought he was imagining things, but as their eyes met, the noise of the room seemed to fade away. It was as if time had stopped, and all the emotions they had buried over the past year came rushing back. Summoning his courage, Nathaniel crossed the room. "Evelyn," he said softly, his voice carrying a mix of surprise and longing. "Nathaniel," she replied, her voice steady but her heart racing. They stepped aside to a quieter corner, away from the crowd. The conversation started awkwardly, with polite questions about work and life, but soon the walls between them began to crumble. Nathaniel apologized for the ways he had failed her, for not being there when she needed him most. His voice cracked as he admitted how much he had missed her, how empty his life had felt without her. Evelyn, too, opened up about her pain, her loneliness, and the grief she had carried alone. As they spoke, their voices trembling with emotion, the weight of the past year seemed to lift. The anger and hurt that had once defined their separation began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of understanding and forgiveness. For the first time in a long time, Evelyn felt the warmth of hope, and as Nathaniel reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. Instead, she held on, as if anchoring herself to the possibility of a new beginning. "I've changed, Evelyn," Nathaniel said, his voice firm but vulnerable. "I know I can't undo the past, but I want to build a future with you, a better one, if you'll let me." Evelyn looked into his eyes, searching for the sincerity in his words, and she found it. "I never stopped loving you, Nathaniel," she admitted, tears glistening in her eyes. "But if we do this, it has to be different. We have to be different." Nathaniel nodded. "We will be, I promise." That night, they left the gala together, ready to start anew. Evelyn and Nathaniel's second wedding was nothing like their first. This time, it wasn't about grandeur or impressing hundreds of guests. It was about love, forgiveness, and the promise of a new beginning. The ceremony was held in a small garden surrounded by close family and friends. Evelyn wore a simple yet elegant ivory dress, and Nathaniel couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle. Their vows were heartfelt and raw, filled with promises to prioritize each other and their relationship. "I vow to be present, to listen, and to never let life pull us apart again," Nathaniel said, his voice steady but emotional. Evelyn, with tears in her eyes, responded, "I vow to trust, to forgive, and to always believe in the love that brought us here." The wedding was followed by a quiet reception filled with laughter, heartfelt toasts, and the warmth of those who had supported them through their journey. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect. A year later, Evelyn and Nathaniel welcomed twin boys, Leo and Miles, into their lives. 2 years after that, they had a daughter, Grace. Their home was filled with love, laughter, and the chaos of raising 3 children. Evelyn and Nathaniel had finally found the balance they had once struggled to achieve. Nathaniel learned to prioritize family over work, while Evelyn found joy in both her career and motherhood. Together, they built a life that was far from perfect, but filled with meaning and love. As the years went by, Evelyn and Nathaniel's home became a sanctuary of love, laughter, and the kind of chaos that only a growing family could bring. Their mornings were a symphony of life. Leo and Miles racing down the hall, their laughter echoing as they competed to see who could reach the breakfast table first, while little Grace toddled behind them, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. The smell of pancakes filled the air as Evelyn flipped them with practiced ease, and Nathaniel poured coffee for them both, sneaking a kiss on her cheek as they exchanged a smile that spoke of gratitude and contentment. Nathaniel had transformed from the workaholic CEO he once was into a devoted father and husband. He still ran Blake Enterprises with the same ambition, but his priorities had shifted. He made it a point to leave the office early for Leo and Miles's soccer games, where he cheered louder than anyone else, or to sit front row at Grace's ballet recitals, his eyes glistening with pride. Evelyn, too, had found balance. While she remained a trailblazer in neurosurgery, she no longer let her career consume her. She made time for bedtime stories, family dinners, and spontaneous weekend adventures that often ended with the kids falling asleep in the back seat, their faces sticky with ice cream. Their favorite tradition was Sunday Family Day, a sacred time reserved for just the 5 of them. Some Sundays were spent exploring nature trails, where the kids would collect rocks and leaves as treasures. Other times, they stayed home, baking cookies that never quite turned out perfect but always tasted like love, or piling onto the couch for movie marathons, wrapped in blankets and surrounded by bowls of popcorn. As Evelyn and Nathaniel watched their children grow, Leo and Miles with their boundless energy and Grace with her quiet curiosity, they often found themselves exchanging quiet smiles, their hearts full. They knew that every laugh, every hug, and even every mess was a reminder of how far they had come. Their home wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and it was filled with a love that had been tested and proven unbreakable. Of course, life wasn't without its challenges. There were tantrums, sleepless nights, and the occasional argument. But through it all, Evelyn and Nathaniel had learned to lean on each other, to communicate, and to never let the small struggles overshadow the immense joy they had found. As they watched their children grow, Leo and Miles with their boundless energy and Grace with her quiet curiosity, they often found themselves reflecting on how far they had come. Their journey had been anything but easy, but it had shaped them into the family they were now. Their story wasn't just about second chances. It was about resilience, forgiveness, and the beauty of building a life together, one filled with love so deep and enduring that it could weather any storm. Evelyn and Nathaniel had found their happily ever after, not in perfection, but in the messy, beautiful reality of a life well lived and a love well earned.